Ah yes, the Sony PlayStation 2. What a great console it was, what a great era. Afternoons filled with endless hours of gaming and non-stop fun. It's almost impossible to list or even think of all the great and amazing games that made my childhood what it was and defined the gaming landscape at the time. But despite this, there are certain games I didn't even know existed, one of which I will be discussing today. Berserk Millennium Falcon Arc, Chapter of the Holy Demon War. Wow, that was a mouthful. I probably won't have to explain anything about the Berserk franchise. I'm simply assuming that you already know most of that considering that you've clicked onto this video, so here's a simple rundown of Kentaro Miura's masterpiece. Released as a prototype, the Berserk manga saw the light of day in 1988 Japan, originally printed in a monthly subscription magazine called Monthly Animal House, which is now discontinued. There have been multiple adaptations such as TV shows and movies, also games, otherwise we wouldn't be able to talk about today's topic, which after all is a video game based on said franchise. I have personally been following the Berserk manga for a very long time. I've been obsessed with it at times. Living through so many releases and chapters made me feel deeply connected to its world and characters. Therefore, I was extremely saddened and devastated after hearing of Miura's passing on May 6, 2021. I'm aware that there have been a couple of new chapters being released by his associates and so on, but Miura's creative mind is sadly not with us anymore. He might have not managed to finish the story of Berserk in his lifetime, but the lack of a proper ending reminds us all that despite going through the perils of life, this is not the end. The globe will keep spinning, and there's so much more to come. Just like Guts is fighting off demons and monsters on a daily basis without knowing where his path might lead him eventually, we ought to do the same, and hopefully achieve our dreams one day and prevent them from turning into nightmares. Keep on fighting, guys, and don't give up. This video is dedicated to Miura. Let us remember his creative works and praise his fantasy for all the wondrous moments he gave us. Now let's get back to the main topic of this video. The Berserk game in question was released on October 7, 2004 in Japan for the PlayStation 2. Developed by Yuke's Co. Limited, which might sound familiar to you if you played any of the WWE games. They have worked on quite a bunch of them. Published by Sammy Corporation, a company whose main focus is the production and distribution of pachinko machines. Yet in 2004 they merged with Sega to found Sega Sammy Holdings and expand into the video game market. Sega at that time was facing tons of financial struggles, and Sammy wanted to diversify their business portfolio, so both companies decided to combine their efforts and merge. Important to note here is that Sega Sammy has of today sold a decent portion of their ownership of Sega Entertainment. Yuke's had previously developed another Berserk game for the Sega Dreamcast console in 1999. Published by a different company, this game was sold not only in Japan, but also abroad, meaning there's an official English release of the game.
Blood smeared everywhere, bathing in its warmth, spilling endless blood. That is all I wanted.
I will not be focusing too much on that. Perhaps I will do a video about that game at a later point in the future. The reason as to why I brought this game up to begin with is that the Berserk Millennium Falcon Arc game for the PlayStation 2 ended up being released in Japan and Korea only. I therefore had to resort to play an emulated version of the game. Please don't freak out about this, but I also used a fan-translated version. This translation was done by an Italian group whose name I sadly didn't manage to track down. The only thing I managed to figure out is that one of their members goes by Wesker90, at least according to my research. So kudos to them and thank you for providing this patch. I initially encountered a bunch of issues I couldn't resolve, mostly of graphical nature, like missing UI or flickering. After a quick Google search and some trial and error, I easily managed to fix them though, so there's that. By the way, I would also like to mention that the Korean version of the game and the limited Japanese boxed edition both came with a Guts action figure, which go for pretty high prices on most online marketplaces nowadays. Let us get hands on now. So what's this game even about? Berserk is all and well, but considering that the game came out in 2004, it's impossible for it to cover the entire storyline so far. The game takes place during the Millennium Empire arc, to be more precise from volume 22 all the way through volume 27, which was the last volume of the manga released in Japan before the game came out. I tried to find additional data on the game's development, but failed to do so. It's interesting to note though that the game contains parts of a volume which had been released less than half a year before it made it onto the shelves. Spoilers ahead, so if you haven't read the manga or played the game yet and you're planning on doing so, please be aware that some of the following information contained might diminish your experience reading Berserk or playing the game. So with that out of the way, let me elaborate on the core elements of the setting. The game basically starts shortly after the eclipse and deals with the events that lead to Guts meeting his companions such as Shirke and Co.
You play through much of the story forward, up until the point at which the house of the witch Flora gets attacked by Grunbelt and his associates. And yes, he does turn into a giant dragon. The game is split into 8 different stages or levels, and each stage deals with different chapters of the manga.
Alongside exploring those levels and fighting the bosses, Susumu Hirasawa's lovely soundtrack accompanies you. The gameplay can be described as a mix of Dynasty Warriors and other hack and slash type games. At times, for example during certain boss fights, it felt a bit like playing a Souls-like, but not really. Those games are very different, it just reminded me a little of them, perhaps due to the Berserk franchise having influenced the From Software games a lot, but rather in setting and enemy design, not really in terms of gameplay. Each stage usually contains a large map that you have to navigate through and fight off hordes of monsters, which will grant you experience points that you can use to upgrade certain stats or character abilities.
Those abilities, for example, but not limited to, could be Pack healing you, or Shirke temporarily increasing your defense.
To get back to the maps part, these maps can be tough to navigate since they can be large at times, confusing twists and turns that look very similar to each other, and a minimap that might not always help you the most. Occasionally, you will have to deal with destructible obstacles or events that have to be beat in order to move on to the next section. That could be, for example, fighting off a huge horde of monsters for a couple of minutes, so nothing impossible. At the end of each stage, there's at least one boss, often multiple bosses waiting for you, which you will have to beat one after another, though the game usually lets you save in between each fight. I personally found these boss fights to be very entertaining and intriguing. Even though some of them seemed unbeatable at first, it turned out that some bosses require you to understand specific mechanics or know of certain strategies in order to even damage them. This doesn't really pose too much of an issue if you're willing to Google some stuff or have the patience to try and keep trying until things fall into place and you know what you've got to do. After you manage to play through the entire game, you are treated with a few rewards. You can either replay boss fights you particularly enjoyed, or try yourself at the so-called 100 animal murder challenges. Beating each of these levels will grant you a secret weapon that you can equip to play the game with. I personally haven't done so myself, but according to my research, each weapon tends to have a similar, if not the same stats, sounds and animations. I should also mention that each main game stage contains collectibles in the first playthrough that give you some experience points upon collecting them, and during your second playthrough, each stage will contain demon sword fragments, which can also be obtained through collection and allow you to unlock yet another weapon. Next, I'd like to talk a bit about the negative aspects. There aren't too many anyways, and you're free to disagree with me and flame in the comments section if need be. The first major thing I kinda disliked about the game is that the controls, specifically moving your character around, can sometimes feel a bit clunky, especially since the game doesn't offer you too much control over the camera. This is something you will get used to though, so it's not too bad. It's just one of the many things that highlight that not every aspect of the game really aged that well. Another thing that did grind my gears a little was the level design, in particular of the last stage. There was a passage that seemed maneuverable on the map, but it wasn't due to height differences, as you can see. But I'm blaming my inability to properly read the map for this one, no hard feelings on that. Overall, I'm very glad that I gave this game a try. I thoroughly enjoyed playing the game and I had a lot of fun doing research for this video. I can wholeheartedly recommend this game and the entire Berserk franchise in general. If you haven't read the manga yet or seen the 1997 TV show, you should honestly do that. Maybe not immediately right now, but definitely in the future.
If you'd like to, perhaps I managed to get you interested in playing this game yourself, and if you do so, I hope you manage to enjoy it. Simply overlook some of the more aged aspects of the game, such as its graphics or controls, and have fun with it.
As I'm also a huge fan of the From Software games, and I noticed that I mentioned them a couple of times throughout this video, please also give those a try if you've got some time on your hands and you want to challenge yourself a little. If you managed to make it to the end of this video, I would like to thank you for your time and attention. It's very common, considering how fragile most people's attention spans are, to not fully finish every video you watch. I'm speaking from experience here. Since you made it this far, it would make my day if you leave a like and a comment or even subscribe. If you like this type of content, let me know and I'll see if I can manage to produce more videos of the sorts in the future. With all that said, make sure to enjoy your day. Over and out, have a good one.